Rebbe Shmuel calls him into the office. He says, "Chaimo." He says, "What?" He says, "I hear you go skating at night on the river." He said, "Yes, I do." He says, "Chaimo," he said, "It's cold. Take a scarf." So what was it? What was it? My Rebbe said that the reason he did it was that the reason Rebbe Shmuel did it. He said, "Listen, you want to go, you go, but don't think you're fooling." He says, "Don't think you're fooling. I know what you're doing."
Gentlemen, I'm going to start learning sponsors. A year of learning, friends of Melaskotsky, Moshe Zelig ben Mordechai, Martin Lipman, family in memory of his wife, Martha Chana bat Pinchas, friends of Herb Jeremiah, Tzvi ben Zev, friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel ben Yaakov, friends of Gideon Lazinski, Mordechai Shlomo ben Meir, Bella and David Adler, in memory of her father, Eliyahu ben Yosef Kohen, those who were inspired by our Rebbetzin Emerita, Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malka, Bad Meshulam Yisachar, Gail and Leslie Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Mushka Sprinzer Bad Yosef Chaim Bechava, Hanan ben Moshe Eliezer V'chana, Pesha Bad Shmuel Yitzchak Kalevi V'tzipora, Yisra ben Yoam Moshe HaKohen V'chana, Rexford Friends of Gladys Sherman, Gutta Bad Meir, Michael Klein and Friends of Judah Klein, Yehuda Tzvi ben Chaim, Marsha Bronner, in memory of her husband, Rav Yerachmiel ben Shmuel. A Month of Learning by Charlie Gelfenstein, in memory of his mother, Dacia Gilbert Meir Halevi, by also Charlie Gelfenstein, in memory of his father, Meir ben Yaakov, by Ruvain and Susan Podolsky, in memory of his mother, Cradle Batraga Feivel. A Week of Learning by Marcia Federbush, in memory of her father, Menachem Mendel ben Shlomo, also by the Friends of Bernie Krutz, on the occasion of his second bar mitzvah. Today we also have an individual day of learning by Gigi and Robert Stein, in memory of her sister Chana Sarah bat Shlomo Chaim. When the Shamas have an aliyah, Frank Rafia Velti Yeshua Shamatzliah, Chol B'nai Israel Good Gaben Shtiah.
And we dedicate the learning this morning.
Well, the is in memory of
Neshama for Ruben.
Yes, to Fadel bat Shraga 5.
Okay, Rabbi, I want to explain two things. One, I'm sure you're familiar a little bit if you've ever seen terrace properties or things like that. But certainly in Eretz Yisrael, it was common in Eretz Yisrael for sure, where a house, a roof would be accessible from one side from the road, and the other side would be a drop. That was a common thing. Any place that's mountainous or terraced, you know what I'm saying? You could walk onto the roof from the street, from the street level, and the other side is a drop. So not like we're used to here. Every time you think of a roof on all sides, it's a drop. You walk onto the roof from one side, but yeah, exactly. Wherever it's terrace, you can walk onto the roof naturally from one side. And the second thing is, of course, that in Eretz Yisrael, the rooftops were flat. And above, and it was common to use them, and it's common to use them for animals also. That's point one. Point two, you have to know that when an animal jumps off a roof, there's an arc. So when an animal jumps, jumping is not going to have the animal land adjacent to the walls of the house. It's going to have it land, some distance away. That's a second point. With that, we can understand a great deal about today's Mishnah. We got to rush. We got to go forward quickly because we have a lot of stuff to read. Okay, so let's starting from the Mishnah on Ahmed Beis from yesterday. The Mishnah is smack in the middle of the page. Hafalaf Ahmed Beis. We say Akela Bagdish Kasu Reshagak. So here, there's a dog or a goat that jump from the top of the roof for Shabbos Kalim, and they jump onto the neighbor's courtyard and break utensils that are there. So therefore, what? Mishal Nezik Shalom is to pay full damages. Yeah, that's normal. That's normal. That's a regular. That's normal walking because it's normal for animals to jump off the roof. If they shame wasn't because they are forewarned, and therefore it's regal, it's trampling, and they pay full damages. But furthermore, we learned that we accessed this before, and this is again a grand central for all the laws, for all these laws. If a dog took a hot cake off the coals, but it had a coal attached to it, and it went to where there was standing grain. It ate the hot cake. Okay, but by way of the coals that were connected, he lit up the standing grain, the grain pile. Okay, nezik shalom. For the cake, he pays full damages. That's eating in the private domain. Gadish, okay, but for the pile of grain, the shalim chetzi nezik. Now we're gonna have to see what is that chetzi nezik. Is the chetzi nezik is the half damage goring, or is they have damage, tzroros, is it stones? Now, says the Gemara first, let's understand. The whole reason why they have to pay is time of the kapsu. What is he forewarned? These animals will jump off the roof. Hanaflu, from which I can infer what, that if they would fall down, putter, that they'd be exempt. Why is that? Because when an animal falls off, he never had expected his animal to fall off. That's beyond his control. It's called onus, or or duress, beyond his control. I said 1 second, but I have a problem. This is a famous machlokas in Bava Metzia. What is that? Whenever I have a case where a person starts out by being negligent, but in the end the damage actually came from accident, from true accident, what's the law? Do I say, listen, even though in the end it was an accident, since he was negligent, he should pay? I say, no, even though he was negligent, since there was an accident, he shouldn't pay. It's a machlokas. We have a machlokas in the Moraim above Mitzvah. Alma kasavers over here, but if you're telling me here that if it fell, he's exempt. So you're saying even though what he was negligent vis-a-vis the animal jumping, even though it was accidental that it fell, he doesn't pay. So you see what? That when you start out negligent, in the end it's an accident, you don't pay. Alma, that goes to show. Kasavar, we see anytime you start out negligent, in the end of the accident, the putter is exempt. Okay, Tanya Namayach, and indeed we actually learn the brisa that reads the Mishnah the way that we read it. Why do they need the brisa? Again, because I told you inferences hold very little weight. Inferences are not good, are not mathematical. You understand? There's a million possibilities, and that's why they bring a brisa to back up the inference. Inferences don't work. I'll show you lots of times. Okay, they don't work. They work, but only with a great deal of fighting. But here they have a brisa. Okay, Tanya Namayach. Indeed, we learned a brisa that made the inference like this. If the dog or the goat jump from the roof, they have to pay. That's regular. That's walking. They have to pay full damages. Not flu, but if they fell off, which is an accident, Peturim, you don't have to pay. Now, 1 second. You can't do that for the reason I told you. Once we have an established machlokas, even in the future, we will not allow a Mishnah to not be good according to one another's opinions. Since I have a tradition of a justified argument, I can't leave one of those guys hanging high and dry. If an Amora years later said an opinion that won't work with this Mishnah, then I say I don't understand the Mishnah. It's impossible. It has to be a way to read this Mishnah according to that Amora. So when it says but it's very important. I just explained. Otherwise, it's back to front. Otherwise, it's like it's back. It doesn't make any sense. You have the later person wagging, demanding the beginning. I don't want to use the American metaphor because it's not nice. That's very good the way you read it according to the opinion that we have in Bava Metzia. That if you start out negligent and in the end it's an accident, you're exempt. But according to the opinion, if you start out negligent, even if the end is an accident, you have to pay. Michael and Maimer, how are we going to explain our Mishnah? How can you tell me that if it fell, he's exempt? Since he was negligent in terms of jumping, he should have to pay even when it fell. The answer is no worry. Could go into a car became like I told you before. You have to say that the case where he's exempt from falling is really a case where he wasn't negligent as far as jumping. What do I mean to say? Because since the utensils in his neighbor's yard are right next to the wall, the kfitza lo, the chikafsi, even if it would have jumped, the kfitza lo nafle alive, it never would have hit him because it would have gone out of an arc and it wouldn't have come down. So therefore, the owner of the roof wasn't negligent as far as jumping. So not only was the end an accident, the truth is even in the beginning there was no negligence because jumping, which he has to worry about, jumping never would have damaged these utensils, and therefore what? It's completely accident. He didn't do anything. Amar Rav Zavi Mishmei. So now I can justify the Mishnah according to both opinions. Amar Rav Zavi Mishmei the Rava, but he said a very big chiddush. Pamim shafilu naflu. Okay, namichayv. There are times when even when the animal fell, the owner has to pay. Why? If the animal falling is an accident, why should he pay? I find such a case because let's say the wall was weak. It was weak, and pieces can fall off. When I says 1 second, he says, "Mine, what's it? What are you talking about wall weak? Okay, what do you want to tell me that he should have worried that maybe bricks are going to fall off the wall, and therefore he started out and he's negative. In the end, he says the bricks never fell. And what? And the animals fell. It's the beginning. So it's really the beginning. He was only negligent as far as the bricks falling, but in the end it was an accident. Okay, and we already said that. So therefore, if that's true, how are you going to say that he's chayav according to the person who says that when you're negligent at the beginning and accident at the end that you don't pay? How can you tell me he has to pay? You're right. Yeah, the cases like this, it's where the wall is very thin. It's normal for animals to jump up on the wall and then to fall. So therefore what? Okay, so therefore what? So therefore, what it really makes sense that it's now normal for them to fall. It's now normal for them to fall, and therefore, even falling, they'll be obligated to pay. Tana Rabban, we learned that we learned the price like this: if the dog or the goat jump from down to up, they jump from the bottom, let's say, onto the roof and broke things and did damage. They're exempt. Why? Because it's not normal. Because it's okay. When it says potter, it means they're exempt from full damages, but they do have to pay what? Half damages. Jumping from down to up is still damage, but it's like Karen. It's abnormal. They normally jump up to down. Jumping down to up, they pay half damages like Karen. But from up to down, they have to pay like we learned before. Although a tiny goal, but it's different. When it comes to a man or a chicken, they'll go okay. But man or chicken jump. Pardon me. Right. Whether it's up to down or whether it's or it's from down to up. In all cases, they're obligated. Why? Man, because we don't make it different. Men are always forewarned. Okay, and chickens because it's normal for chickens also to jump up and to do damage. One second. Both this is a kasha both on the last brisa and on our Mishnah. Well, Tanya didn't we learn? We still didn't we learn in another brisa that the dog or the goat that jump, whether it's up to down, or down to up, they're completely exempt. Any way you look at it, how can what's the brisa of the Mishnah? Oh, that up to down is chayav. He answers, don't worry, Tir Gemara, Papa, don't worry. When we learn this brisa that's so strange that says that down to up and up to down are both exempt. Why is that? It really means to say that they're exempt on full damage. Why deep of mepach means the animal went in the reverse way that it normally goes. In other words, kalba bezachira. Usually dogs, if you ever see, they shimmy themselves down when they go down a wall. They dig their. You ever see that dogs do it? They put their claws in and shimmy their way down. For a dog to jump in straight, okay, in a straight down is abnormal. The gadya b'sricha, the other way, for a goat's jump, for a goat to dig its hoofs into the wall while it's going up is abnormal. So therefore, in both of those cases, okay, in both those cases, he's exempt from full damage. He has to pay half. No, I said I preempted the Gemara. The Gemara says Yachim my 1 second. So why are they exempt? The answer is no. They never meant to exempt. Patumin as it's shown, we only meant that they're exempt from full damages. We have to pay half because it's like carrot. Now we started to get down to the heart of things. He said when the dog took the coal, okay, and he told me what talked to the hot cake and the coal, etc. On the hot cake he pays full damages, and on the grain that the dog burnt up by way of the coal, okay, he pays half damage. Now, but in order to get into this, we have to discuss. We know that the Torah obligates us on fire, but the question is, what exactly is it? What exactly? How do we obligate a man for what his fire did? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, we learn. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi say, I didn't do it because for whatever reason. But usually, when I start Baba Kama, one of the first things I talk about is the incredible chiddush that a person is responsible for damage done by his property. It's not self-evident. That's not self-evident. It may be good for a social contract. It may make sense, but why? What am I a cow? Am I a dog? Am I a cat? So we've taken it for granted that a person is responsible.
But you can watch it.
Okay, good. No, of course, you're right. I'm just saying, but that is something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to us. You understand that the fact that you have the privilege of ownership all of a sudden makes you responsible for this thing. What do you mean? Why should I be here? Aren't all men brothers? You can watch my cow. I can watch my cow. You should watch yourself. Who said so? So I'm just trying to say that all of these. This is a tremendous foundation that we have not discussed. We've taken it for granted, and it shouldn't be taken for granted. Now, when it comes to fire, we're not sure what foundation. Sometimes we obligate a person up for their property. Sometimes we obligate a person for what they did.
Fire belongs to an individual.
Who said have to pay? Who said it? Who said it?
Well, that's going to be part of the mitzvah.
They're gonna stay tuned. Stay tuned 1 second. You're gonna see 2 lines. Itmar. Okay, now. So we have to understand, how does fire work? Why is the obligation there? Itmar was taught. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Isha Mishum Chitzav. He says what? That a fire obligates a person because of his arrows. It's the equivalent, okay? It's the equivalent of a man. The fire is really the man. It's like he shot an arrow, or he threw a javelin, and he did the damage. And therefore, what? Just like a man does damage, okay? With his hands, he's chayav for the damage he does by shooting an arrow, by throwing an arrow. Reish Lakish says no. He says no. The reason you're responsible for fire is because it belongs to you. What's the nafkamina? According to Reish Lakish, if you don't own the fire, You're not obligated for the damage that the fire does, even though you're connected to it. If you don't own it, you don't have to pay. Now that's a massive machlokas. My time Rabbi Yochanan. Why did Rabbi Yochanan understand? Why didn't Reish Lakish understand like Rabbi Yochanan? It's really because of the force of the man. Amar Lacha, because he says to him, he says he says what? He says a fire is much different than an arrow. Chitzav, his arrows, mikoko azle, they travel because of his force. He's the guy who shoots it, or he's the guy who throws it. Really, okay. But when it comes to fire, that's when things we learn about fire. Fire is moved by the wind and by other factors. Fire is not moved by the man. The man doesn't move the fire around. So he says you can't say fire is because that fire is because of his possession. Rabbi Yochanan. You can't say, pardon me, the fire is because of his. You can't say the fire is because of his force. Rabbi Yochanan, my time. Why did Rabbi Yochanan say, look, it's because of his possession? Because he says here, this is what you wanted to ask. So what are you talking about? To call something a person's possession, it has to have substance. It has to be tangible. Or less flames have no tangibility. How can a person own a flame? They can own the fuel. They can own this. How can you tell me a person owns the flame that either came from their fuel or that they ignited? That's a big machlokas. Okay, now Tanan we learned. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so we see why each don't like the other's reasoning. Tanan. Now we're going to get down to. Now we're going to start to what do we do? Whatever. How do we weigh things in the Talmud? Someone explains this. You learn Gemara all day long. What's going on? In general, the best way to solve a problem is to prove something. But genuine proof is not common in things that are unclear. The Gemara generally doesn't talk about things that can be proven because they're boring. It's a waste of time. Anything that can be proven directly is it's a waste of time to talk about. We don't want to waste time. We don't waste the time for it. Why? Intelligent people don't speak about those things. You understand? That's for kids. You don't do that. You understand? What is the Gemara talking about? The Gemara goes to the edge of the known universe, to what we do know, and then starts to try and see what we can do. Now, you know that circumstantial evidence in a court of law has no place for the Jewish people. You can't be, we can't be, we like not like the Goyim do. You're saying you're not going to. Okay, we're going to say, okay, but we don't like the Goyim do. We don't do it. But in the court of the mind, circumstantial evidence is king. Why is that? What do we do when we can't prove something directly? What we do is we bring eventually overwhelming circumstantial evidence, and we do indeed make decisions according to it. So again, to make a difference, to use circumstantial evidence in court, that's one thing. To use circumstantial evidence in the mind, that's another thing entirely. So when we cannot prove a point directly, what do? We try and find things that make position A or B very pleasant or very unpleasant. We try to throw mud at everything and to show, listen, if you hold position A, a lot of things come out terrible. A lot of things don't make sense. A lot of things are uncomfortable. And eventually we make it so uncomfortable, we say that it's unlikely that it's true. Or the other way, we sometimes say, we show you, if you say position A is true, a lot of things really, really fit. Okay, but those are all from the outside. So now we're in the mudslinging stage, okay? We can't prove, we don't have a proof. We don't have a proof of the point. Let's try and arrange arguments, pro and con, to make one position less comfortable than the other, okay? So the Gemara wants to fight with Reish Lakish. You say what? That fire has to do with the person's money, possession. Didn't we learn in our Mishnah? Akelah shenotel charara, which is the dog took the hot cake, okay, and he went and he went to the standing grain and he ate the hot cake and he burnt the grain. He has to pay full damages for the hot cake and half damages for the grain. It makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan that a fire is the person's own strength. So then when the dog does fire, what is it? It's the strength of the dog. What's halacha for the strength for the force of an animal? Half damages. It makes perfect sense. Okay, chitz of the calibu. So just like an arrow is the force of a man. So therefore, and the fire is the force of a man. Then when a dog uses fire, it's the force of the dog. What's the halacha for force of an animal? That's half damages of what? Of stones. So you pay half. But according to the opinion that according to Reish Lakish, he says that fire has to be his possession. He says this fire doesn't belong to the owner of the dog. This guy's dog went to somebody else's hot cake. So the hot cake and the fire belong to who? To the guy who owns the cake. The hot cake and the fire belong to the same guy. So how can you make this guy chayav for the fire? The guy who owns the dog, he doesn't own the fire. Kasha to Reish Lakish. Kasha Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, no. He says, what? You're making a mistake. He says, now explain what the case was. You think what? You think that the dog put down the coal and it burnt, okay, in which case it shouldn't be high. Why? Because it's not his fire. He says, no, duye. The dog threw the coal onto the grain pile. Now, what happened? Why does it work? Obviously, for the cake, he has to pay full damages. That's shame. He's eating it. And the place where he put the coal, and there's now be careful. I want to explain this. It's very important. In a grain pile, think of grains of grain. So grain pile is really a million little things. A pile of grain is a million things. So only in one place where the coal hits is it what? Is the dog doing it? Okay, so therefore what? So on the place where he puts it down, on the place where he puts it down, okay, he says he pays half damages. Okay, that's really the law of what? He says you're right. That's really the law of the force of the animal. So he's going to pay half damages. But you're right. Gadish Kula, but for the whole rest of the grain pile, he says what the answer is what? He says, even though it was burnt by the fire, Potter, he's completely exempt. Okay, why? Because that's fire, and fire, he's exempt because it doesn't belong to him. I Rabbi Yochanan. So 1 second, he says, so according to Rabbi Yochanan, you have to hold what? Rabbi Yochanan says, hey, what? No, the dog didn't throw it. The dog put it down. So it can't be throwerless. He put it down. If you put it down, so then how's he going to pay half damages? For the hot cake, okay, the way he understands it, you're right. He says both on the hot cake and the place where he put it, he has to pay full damages. Here for the hot cake because it's eating, okay, and where he put the fire down, okay, that is called regal. That's walking. It's just normal. It's like he did it with his own body. He bodily damaged it in the process of eating. Okay, okay, but what? When it comes to the rest of the grain pile, all the other hundreds of pieces of grain that took fire, he pays half damages. Why? Because that is also that's only from his force, and that's half damages of stones. Now, so again, let's fight. So okay, we answered Reish Lakish. Let's try and fight Reish Lakish again. Toshma, come, let's fight him. We learned there's a famous Mishnah later. It's coming up. It's also a famous intersection of damages and Hanukkah. One of the Hanukkah is big. We'll talk about this in Hanukkah time. The rabbis don't like talking about Hanukkah. It's clear. I have a lot of things to explain. We'll get Mr. Bashir eventually, but the rabbis don't like talking about it. The Goyim talk about it, and all the external books talk about it. The rabbis do. Take a look. They really don't want. Some things they don't feel good. The rabbis really don't want to talk about it. That's why I don't know if you ever noticed on Hanukkah, everybody makes these Hanukkah parties and they're going crazy to find Torah, Hanukkah Torah, all these things by way of Alaska, this and that. Why? The rabbis don't want to talk about it too much. There's a reason. Yeah. There's a reason. Okay, we're about to get there. Yeah. It was a terrible thing. Exactly. The rabbis don't want to talk about it. Anyway, let's take a look. But here's a place where we know about Hanukkah a little bit. Toshma, at least by Remez. Toshma, we learned the Misakash Reish Lakish. If a guy's camel is loaded with flax, when it's going through it's passing through the public domain. And the way he loaded the animal, the flax goes into the storekeeper's store. And it was ignited on the fire of the lamp of the storekeeper. The hidden kasabira, and then it what? And then it lit up the whole house. Baal Gomel Chayev, the owner of the camel, has to pay on for the damages of burning down the house. Why is that? Because he was negligent for loading his animal in a way that would enter the store and become on fire. We learned, but it continues the Mishnah. If the storekeeper left his lamp outside, then the storekeeper is obligated because he shouldn't have put it outside. Yitzchak says, however, even though he said if the storekeeper puts his lamp outside that he has to pay, but in Hanukkah potter, he had a right. It was the lamp of Hanukkah. He has a right to put it outside now. Okay, and therefore he's exempt. Now, the only thing is like this: why is it that the camel owner has to pay when his flax went into the store? It all makes sense that he has to pay according to Yochanan. His fires because of his arrows, and just like just like when a man puts down the fire and it does the job, the man is chayav. Okay, the same thing here. Chitz of the gamalhu. It is what is the force of the camel, and therefore what it's like stones, and he pays what he has to pay. What when we said he pays what half damages, Elamando, but according to Reish Lakish, Mishum Mono, who says what? The fire has to belong to the guy. Hayesh Lavamon of the Balgomel, same thing we asked before. 1 second. His flax lit on the storekeeper's fire. The fire doesn't belong to the camel guy, it belongs to the storekeeper. Why is the camel guy paying for the house? It's not his fire, according to Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish, don't worry. This is what it's talking about. It's where the flax, so to speak, was in contact, so to speak, with the whole house. It wasn't that it made a fire and it spread. The flax was pressed against the house. Okay, the flax lit and it's pressed against the house, and therefore what? So therefore it's igniting the house directly. It's igniting the house. It's igniting directly, and therefore what? You're right. He's not chayiv for the fire that traveled and damaged. He's not obligated. But really, what he's really obligated because it's like he directly, the body of the animal is directly he's rubbing against these directly. He's directly destroying the house. Exactly. 1 second. If the case is where what that so to speak, the camel directly lit the house once the fire was on it. How do you read the end of the Mishnah? We learned we said if the shopkeeper put his lamp outside, then he's obligated. If the case of the Mishnah is where what was the flax is what ignited directly the whole house, then why is the storekeeper obligated? The owner of the camel should have moved back. He should have backed up. Why is he letting his camel stay there and letting up the house? Why is the storekeeper chayiv? The camel guy's chayiv. It says no, no, it's where he stood there, right? The camel was standing there and didn't go backwards. Okay, go back. Understand? So he says, even so, what good is that if it's standing? Okay, if it's standing there, okay, it was standing there. There's even more reason why the shopkeeper should not be chayiv. It's all the more reason if it stood there. It's all the more reason why the shopkeeper should be exempt. Rav Huni said, no, you make a mistake. What happened was it was urinating. You can't move a camel. When a camel's urinating, it doesn't want to go any place. Okay, therefore what? The camel it was urinating, and the owner of the camel can't really move it back. So he's considered what? Under duress. It's beyond his will. It's beyond his will, and therefore the shopkeeper is obligated. He says, and furthermore, and therefore what? Ratio, that's why it makes sense. In the first case, what? The owner of the camel was obligated because he was negligent and he lit the house on fire. He shouldn't have overloaded. He shouldn't have made such a big load. Okay, seifa and overloaded. Seifa in the second case, why is the shopkeeper obligated? He shouldn't have left his lamp outside. Toshma, again, we were trying to fight Reish Lakish. How can you tell me fire? No, that's not that case. This is not the case where it wasn't Hanukkah. You're right, but Hanukkah is different. This is the case where it wasn't Hanukkah. Yeah, this is the case where it wasn't Hanukkah. Toshma. So I'll ask you another kasha to Reish Lakish. Here's another way. Amadlik is a gadish via gedi a kafas low. Now, if a man went and he lit up a guy's pile of grain. His friends. Okay, low, and there was a goat tied up next to it. It doesn't really make a difference, but that's what he said here. And the slave is next to it. Okay, and the slave and the goat were all burnt up together with the grain pile. So what does the guy pay? Chayev, the guy who lit it, he has to pay for the goat, and he has to pay for the grain. But he's not considered a murderer for the slave. Why is that? Because the slave should have run away. Evid Kafaslo. But on the other hand, if the slave was tied up, and the goat was next to it, the Nisra female, and it got burnt up, Potter, then he's exempt, even though he really has to pay because the goat doesn't know to run away either. Even though he has to pay for the grain and he has to pay for the goat, he's exempt. Why? Because since the slave couldn't run away, he killed the slave. And he's going to be obligated to be killed. So we know that's our famous rule of kamle b'derabmine. Like we're going to see in a minute. What? Whenever a person has at the same time incurred a death penalty and a monetary penalty, we give him the death penalty and we don't make him do.
Even if we don't give him.
I said anytime he incurs it. I didn't say what we do. Anytime he incurs does something where he incurs the death penalty and a amount. I'm not talking about the punishment. I'm not talking about the punishment. I'm talking about the action. It's him when he does an action and incurs the death penalty and a monetary penalty, we don't give him the monetary penalty. Now he says, Bishlam now again when I say kash, that all makes sense. That makes sense according to Yochanan, who says what? That arrows, that fire is because of a man's arrows. Mishamachi Pater. That's why he's exempt. Why? Because since he killed the slave, okay, since he killed the slave, so he's exempt from the monetary payments. Alamanda Omar Isha Mishamamona, but the one who says what? That his fire, Beishlakish, who says that his fire is because of possession, Amai Pater. Why should it be exempt for the goat and for the grain pile? He's not considered that he killed the man, because only Rish Lakish, only Rabbi Yochanan holds what, that it's his strength. The fire is his strength, so he's the one who killed the slave. Okay, Ilu Katal Tura Avda. But if you tell me what, that the fire is only possession, well, look at what's the law of possessions. If a man's ox kills a slave, he says, you're gonna tell me what also that he's not going to have to pay. He's not going to have to pay. Listen, for the slave and for everything. Okay, he's not. There's no. He has to pay, and therefore what? Only if the person himself does the act. Okay, how come over here? How come over here he doesn't have to pay? So the answer is, if it's really his money, the answer is, don't worry, I'll explain it to you. What happened was he actually put the slave on fire. He personally lit the slave on fire. Okay, now so he killed the slave. Okay, directly. Okay, and therefore what? To come labor the Rabbinate. So therefore what? He's exempt on all the monetary payments. 1 second, where it says Yochi by the member, he says if that's true, everybody knows that you don't have to pay the monetary payment. What's the chiddush? Why would you have to teach me such a thing? The answer is lo tzricha. It's tremendous chiddush. That what? That you would think, I might have thought, when is it true that a person is exempt on the monetary payment? It's when the person he owes the money to, would theoretically owe the money to, is the same person that he did the death penalty action to. The same one that he did a thing that could incur capital punishment to the same person he did monetary damage. That's good. But here the case is what? It's here, the slave and the grain pile belong to one guy, and the goat belongs to another guy. So you think what? Okay, he's exempt on the grain, but he shouldn't be exempt on the goat, because the goat belongs to somebody else. The answer is what? The answer is what? He says no. It's where the goat belongs to one, and the slave belongs to a different person. And you might have thought, well, he doesn't have to pay for the goat because it's not the person to whom he did the death penalty problem. It tells you what? No, as long as it's simultaneous, regardless of who he incurred the capital problem against, all the monetary payments simultaneously are exempt. Toshma, again, we're going to ask the Kash to Reish Lakish. How can you tell me the fire is because of monetary damage? We had this earlier. If a guy gives his fire to a deaf mute, to an imbecile, or to a minor, incompetent people, Pater of Bidini Adam, so he's exempt for the damage that's in court. No, in a human court he's exempt. We can't collect the money from him. But the Chai Bidini Shamayim, he's obligated in the hands. He's in the hands of heaven. No, the heaven's not going to forgive him until he pays on his own. You should know that this is a big problem, and you have to be careful if you're judging cases like this. If you're the judge, you're not allowed to do this. You have to only tell them out of court. You don't tell them in court. It's not your job. If you're the judge, you have to say you're exempt. And when you go out later, if you go out of court, then you change your hat, you take off your Dayan hat, and you put on your Chacham hat. And you can tell the guy, by the way, you should pay, but not in court. You understand? When you're the Dayan, you tell the guy, your Pater. I'm sorry, Pater. We tell the other litigant, sorry, you lose the money, you're exempt. Only when you go out of court, now you want to behave as a Chacham and not as a Dayan, you can tell the guy. Okay, it's important. You have to know we have by David Melch the same thing. By David Melch, you have, for example, it says that he did tzedakah mishpat. So how could you do kindness and judgment? Either you're judging or you're acting kindly. So where it says no, what happened when a poor man was being brought up on charges that he owes money in the court of David Melch, and a rich man was going against him, even though the poor man was a poor man, but he owed the money. David Melch said, "Sorry, yep, hey, you got to pay." When he walked out of court. Outside of court, he took the money out of his pocket and he paid it, but not in court. You can't. When you're the judge, you got to judge. You can't be the nice guy when you're judging. Judging is judging. You want to be a private individual. Wait till you leave the courtroom. Okay, now, this all makes sense. That what when you told me that it's because of that, like Rabbi Yochanan, that it's because of the force of a man Okay, chitz of the cherishus, and now it's the force when you gave it. It's the force of the imbecile or the incompetent that does the damage. They apply the fire. Okay, they didn't. Elamando Omar Eishim Mimono, but if the obligation is really what because of the money, okay. Ilu Moser Shor L'Cherishot V'Katan. What was the halacha we learned before? If he gave his ox, his money to one of these incompetents, Achinami D'Lechayev, going to tell me what that he's not obligated? We learned. We all here learned together earlier what that when he gave the ox to them, he has to pay. Okay, it's his money doing damage. So how come if it's his money doing damage, when he gave his money the fire? Okay, how can he be exempt? The Gemara says, "Nah, you make a mistake. You make a mistake." We learned. Rish Lakish explained, the whole case of what of the incompetence where he's exempt is because what he gave them wasn't really a damager. He gave them a coal, and the incompetent fanned it until the fire came up. So therefore, the owner never gave them a damager of a muscle shall have it, but he actually gave them a flame. He would be obligated. You're right. In court by the laws of man. My time of because it's a damager. So no problem. Enachanami. He would really have to pay. If he really gave him a fire, he'd have to pay, but he didn't. Yochanan says no. Even if he actually gave him a flame, he's still exempt from the laws of man. Why? Because he believed tzavosa the cherish, the holding, the grasping of the incompetent. Okay, of whatever here it's deaf mute. Kogorim. He says what he did it. No, it means to say what. In other words, even a flame is still not going to be a damager on its own, except for the fact that the incompetent took it someplace and applied it. Okay, okay, and the only and also though, but it's only what he has to. Rabbi Yochanan would only obligate him where what the sender, okay, where he gave him dry wood, the silta and kindling. Ushraga, and in there that's lit, and a lamp that's lit, or a candle that's lit, that if he gave him these things, okay, there he actually gave him a true damager, and he is obligated. Okay, from here I think it's a good stopping place. We'll continue tomorrow. Everyone have a wonderful day, and it's a really good show.
Whenever we were
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen.
Yes, adore, yes, love, yes, love, schmeit, kutsche, brichu.